Thank you very much. So I'm very aware I'm the thing standing between your T's and we's, as it were. So I'll crack on. So hello, welcome to our project presentation. My name's Gareth. I'm the PI of the Perpetual Plastic Food to Go project, and I'm joined today with my colleague, COI, Dr. Elliot Woolley as well, who's been leading some of the more technical aspects. And if you have any more questions around those as we go on, wait for the break, ask him, try not to make me look too stupid. So by way of a brief introduction to our project, we're a 3.5-year project. We're a design-led project, and we're pretty much focused on the single-use plastic associated with food to go. So that's predominantly looking at the packaging that envelops sandwiches and salad packs. Now, I very much feel this is preaching to the converted, and many of you today will have your own views on this, but this is one of those questions that I'm always getting asked, is like, sorry Gareth, isn't plastic supposed to be bad or something? Or isn't plastic packaging bad? Well, anything can be bad, really. Any product material can be bad if it's designed, produced, consumed, disposed of inappropriately. So it kind of all really depends how it's used, how it's interacted with. And to give you a sense of the scale of food to go as well, and of the potential for misuse. So if we're looking at food to go packaging, from crisp packets through to napkins and boxes and all these things, it generates nearly 11 billion items of waste, packaging waste, per year, which is a significant volume. And you know, the problem we have is that plastic is so intrinsic, it's so tied into this type of packaging. So it's not only that we have this large amount of waste typically, but quite often it's problematic because it's plastic, it's multi-material, it's quite often treated as single use and as disposable. So today and tomorrow you're going to hear lots of perspectives around this, around plastics, around circular economy and these sort of ideas. But I would say that, you know, if we want to get to a true circular economy, then we can't be okay with anything really being single use. Ideally, that we should always have some sort of end-of-life strategy to try and bring this back, to keep that value going in some way, shape or form. So plastic packaging material can be bad. It kind of depends how it's designed and how it's consumed and disposed, but it doesn't need to be harmful. So, in our opinion, no single approach alone will overcome all of these problems in how we move towards a circular economy of production and consumption. So we've brought together a team of designers, including myself, sustainable manufacturing experts such as Elliot, and polymer chemists at Loughborough to look at this issue. Now, I've realized I forgot to put any pictures of the team here. I'm doing you a favor, we're quite an ugly team. You can find us all on the website. Apologies about that. But we have been working alongside industry as well as part of this. So you can see some of the names there. So working from manufacturer through to fillers, through to retailers, working around this idea. And what we think we've got really is a direction that helps to challenge what consumers do and how they think, but also to challenge what industry do and how they think as well. Cool. Oh, hello. So one of the things that we looked at quite early on was this idea of this competition within the supply chain. So who owns what, and what is it they're actually trying to achieve? So the pack producer, filler, retailer, recycler, they all have different ideas of what value is. And to be honest, that's an absolute nightmare. We quite often talk about supply chains like they're this tame, controlled, it's a thing, but quite often it isn't. It's just many different businesses trying to work together in some way to achieve something that they care about quite a lot. So it's quite interesting, this sort of idea of all these competing values. But one of the other complications as well that I think is, how do you then take that complex beast of a thing that we parcel as a supply chain, and we genuinely try to move that forwards? And how do we deal with that? So can we say to single-use plastic packaging manufacturers, sorry, you're not needed anymore in our new version of the supply chain in the future? Is that a responsible thing to do? Or is it better to say, okay, well, there's a certain amount of knowledge, skills, abilities, infrastructure, technology. How do we take that and we try to move that forwards and enable that in a future way towards a new purpose? So this really was the first point of our investigation, was how do we get everybody around a table, or back then when it was the height of COVID, a digital whiteboard, Miro everywhere. And that's what we did. So we got a range of stakeholders and we looked at the current model. We looked at the barriers to transitioning to a reusable model. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth about this, but just a few of the sort of top lines from this sort of paper around this work. So one of them was just this absolute sort of fear of the high level of capital expenditure required to realize some of the ambition. So one of the things we identified quite early was how do we de-risk that transition? How can we make use of what they have before we're trying to tell them you need to spend tens, hundreds of thousands to change to a new thing that could be quite risky. But also that is an opportunity. So you might be the growth of a new business or the first to market in some way. The other thing was that you can't have technology at the sake of food waste. So quite often we're focusing on the pack. Pack's really important. We're doing a pack. But it's remembering that the pack actually envelops a thing. The product isn't the package. It's the thing that sits within it as well. So there's a lot of concerns around if you're moving to novel ideas around reuse, for example, then what are the consequences for food life and end of life around there, and food waste and the CO2 impact and various other concerns. Another thing which always kind of amused us slightly was this idea of a bespoke mindset. So our partners were very adamant that consumers require new stuff. They need this seasonal update of all their packaging. You know, you can't buy a sandwich unless it looks Christmassy in some way. But then when we say, okay, that's interesting. So where's the data? Where's the information? How do you know this? There was silence. So it's pretty much driven from the marketing branding perspective, not actually what people need, but what they think they can sell. So in parallel with looking at value, we've also been looking at technology. So we've been looking at technology in order to enable and de-risk this transition. So that's predominantly fell into two camps. One is sustainable manufacturing, so supporting the backstage processes around quality assurance, around sort of cleanliness and defamation. And another aspect's been looking at the polymer chemistry, so trying to see if there's some intelligent way we can track and trace our packs in some way. So one of the things we've been looking at is the washing of rPET, because one of the things we realized was there's no standardized protocol around this, around plastic goods that were intended for reuse and food contact. That wasn't a thing. So that's one of the things that Elliot's been looking at in particular. And we've also demonstrated the first use of UV in order to track the level of fouling as it goes through various cleaning cycles, which is one of the things. It looks a bit, a CSI type crime scene type thing, but that's what you can see just there. And it was shown using this UV system to perform with the same accuracy as ATP assay, which is currently the sort of gold standard in industry for assessing cleanliness. So again, Elliot can take your questions about all of that stuff later. And we've also been looking at the integration of fluorescent markers into our polymers as a way of assessing rapid degradation as these things are reused constantly. If I'm honest, didn't really work. Didn't really work at all with PET, showed a little bit of promise with PP. But it did lead to quite a nice serendipitous invention, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So limited success with the tracking. One of the other things we were looking at around technology was this standardizing the measurement of deformation. So I know various other teams have been looking at deformation in terms of scratching, etc. But we were looking at how the pack itself deforms when it's used more than once. Because one of the anecdotal things that we heard at the start of the project was when we'd ask any of these sort of fillers or packaging designers what they did, Quite often they design a thing, look at it, put it in the boot of their car, drive it around for a couple of weeks and just kind of see what happens. So how does it fall apart? How's it damaged? I'm sure there's more standardized protocols out there, but when you actually ask them what they do, quite often that is what they do, is they put it through that rough and ready sort of way of understanding it. But predominantly it's about visual assessment. It's seeing how it survives through some sort of test. Because remember, a lot of these people are invested in single use, not necessarily reuse as well. So one of the things that we've developed is this method where you're effectively using a 3D scan of the pack, so before wash and after wash, and you put it into Rhino software, and which is a CAD software, which is a computer software. And basically you can do a deviation analysis to see exactly how it's deforming and where it is deforming as well, which can then inform your decision making as a designer. So this is from an off-the-shelf sort of standard rPET meat tray. And you can see from this that the base of it has really started to deform. It started to warp as it's been washed. So therefore, as a designer, you're saying, well, how would we reinforce that perhaps as one of the weak parts of the thing? We've also given consideration to the consumer, to the human in the system. What are they trying to achieve? So generally there's information around purchase, consumption. There's obviously a growing body around disposal and what happens in those areas. So that's one of the things that we were looking at. And I think what sums this up best for me was we did a survey right at the beginning of the project with M&S customers. And we basically asked them, what would you do with a sandwich pack? So we showed them this picture of a triangular skillet with a little plastic window on it. What do you do in terms of disposal? And a third said, recycle the whole thing. A third said, recycle some of it. And a third said, throw it all away. So clearly there's no consensus for something that is always got messaging on. That's the thing that we're always talking about, is how do we dispose of these things? But when you have all this, this labeling around, oh yeah, now it can be pulled apart, and oh yeah, no, it's got a bit of food waste, so you can't put it here and put it there. It's just really confusing. So people are getting confused, particularly with these multi-material package formats. They're like, well, hang on, is it paper or plastic? Oh, well, what am I doing? Oh no, it's got some food on it. What's going on? So people were just getting really, really confused by it. And the other thing, so the personas, the proto-personas you can just see on the right there. So one of the other things we were looking at in this sort of, it was the summer of 2021, so during post-COVID type thing. We asked people where they were consuming and disposing of their food to go as well. And what was quite interesting at the time was it was split absolutely even across all four of these sectors. So some were eating it at work because they had to still go into work. A quarter at home, quarter outdoors, and a quarter just sat in their car eating their sandwiches at the height of COVID. So two cars parked alongside each other, maybe talking to each other out of the window. Now, I don't think that necessarily helps us today per se, because I think if you rerun that study, you would get very different answers. But I think what it does speak to is how vital it is to understand consumers and how dynamic that landscape can be for something that you might assume to be rather static, like food to go. So far in this presentation, I've kind of talked about all the little components of a service. So about understanding the value of a supply chain, establishing enabling technologies, getting to grips in some way with the complexity of the humans in the system. But so what? You know, how have we pulled that together? What have we done with all of that stuff, really? So what I'm going to do is just talk you through briefly what we have been up to, which predominantly has been focused on the design of a pack within a reuse on-the-go system. I've stolen an image from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, so no credit to me for that, but it does sum up quite well what our system in a broad sense looks like. So the user purchases a product, purchases a sandwich or a salad in a box. They consume that, they return that at either point of sale or a drop-off point. Then it gets cleaned, refilled, and on it goes. So I'm mostly going to talk about the pack. That's mostly because it took us a long time to do it. Cool. So the first thing to really talk about is the process. So I'm not going to go into a lot of depth about this, but other than to say it's a collaborative process working with the KP team. And what we really worked on, so yes, okay, you can work with KP to talk about maximizing manufacturing efficiency, etc., and about how to keep investment costs low, whatever. But also, they're just holders of knowledge and experience in working with polymers and plastics. So this is just an example from one of our workshops where we did a lot of sketching. We then went into model making. We did some 3D prints. We did some cardboard things at one stage. And then eventually, we ended up here. So this is our tray. Here it is. If you've got any doves or confetti you want to release in celebration, now is the time to make the most of that. So there's a load in the food area as well for you to have a look at and break potentially if you want to have a play. So I'm just going to quickly talk you through the features. So it's 880 micron rPET. So it's a monomaterial. It makes it simpler to recycle. It was the thickest material KP were willing to put through their machines. So that's the reason we use that. And it's roughly 2 to 3 times thicker than standard, what you'd find on a standard food tray for PET. It's film sealed rather than clipped. This was partly to stop consumers reusing it. So if you put a clip on, people maybe use it as a sandwich box or whatever. By making it a film, it kind of makes it single use. And it's got this thing that we're calling the premium ledge, which is a bit of marketing bullshit, really. But it's that bit at the top, which is just on the side of the sandwich. And that's really because we were trying to reduce capital expenditure and costs to the business. So we worked with Multivac that seal packs, and that was the size of the shape of their sealing head, was that rectangle. So we worked with that to get this prototype designed and developed. It's also quite flat, it's quite square. That makes it easy to wash, makes it easy to clean, it makes it easier to look at for quality assessment. And it's also leads to square sandwiches, which weirdly enough, people seem to have strong opinions on one way or another. How dare you change the shape of the sandwich? So it's just cut in a different way. It's okay, don't worry about it. Embossed messaging as well. So because it's thermoformed, we can get away with putting this messaging in. So we heavily borrowed from the many Happy Returns project here and the work they've been doing around linguistics. So at the top it says open, eat, return. And at the base it says return is the new recycling as well. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth, mainly because I don't have much time to go into a lot of depth. But this is kind of where we're at right now. So we've done we put it through 2 types of testing, deformation testing and consumer perception testing. So what we can say is that after at least 10, what we've called wash and squash, but I think it's very different to Maria's wash and squash. But if you put it through industry standard cleaning processes, and then we applied a 5 kilogram weight, so that would be 1 cycle. Do that 10 times, it doesn't deform at all, or very negligible. So it can be resealed, which is very different to standard PET formats. And the other thing is we're currently analyzing the data on it, but we've interviewed 19 participants comparing the R square format to a triangular format. And some of the interesting things they are saying is that it feels more plate-like, more like crockery. It feels more robust, feels more hygienic in some way as well. So that's quite interesting outcomes from that. Not going to say much about this other than to say we also submitted this to a big competition, so in partnership with KP, submitted it to the ED Awards under the Circular Economy Innovation of the Year category. We didn't win, but we were finalists, but I think that kind of speaks to the interest of this to industry in some way, and it has led on to some fruitful conversations afterwards. So what next? Well, more collaboration more framing challenges. So this is one of the things that we did with the Sheffield team, where we're looking at reframing metaphors, what a label could be. So more of this type of thing, more inquisitive exploration. And this is our next project. Can't tell you all the details, but we have been awarded some funding to develop towards patent and commercialization for various aspects. So watch this space. So thank you very much. I appreciate I'm getting pulled off the stage now. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your time now and for the last 3.5 years. And if anyone has any questions, if we have time, I'd be delighted to take them.